Hey, everyone. Hopefully everyone is doing good. I'm going to kick this off right on the hour here. All right. So I'm going to hop kind of just straight into this deal. I'm going to screen share some stuff with you guys. And then we're going to kind of open this up for Q&A. For any of you guys that haven't been on one of these calls with me, we try to have a little bit of fun and try to teach you something before you're out. So this was the start of this $70,000 deal. Kind of came about the idea or the thought process of doing remote deals accidentally. If any of you guys have ever done pay-per-click, I tried setting up pay-per-click for myself at one point, and I forgot to put a location barrier on it. So I was paying for any We Buy Houses Google search anywhere in the United States. The result was I blew through $1,000 in something like 4 minutes, and then got a notification from Google that I'd used my budget for the day. And it was like, there's a lot of people that want to sell houses in Indianapolis. Turns out I just didn't know what I was doing. So that was what kind of started this process. I had some friends that kind of like did deals remotely, but it was like all in one market and they had a team on the ground. So kind of like what I'm doing now in Indianapolis. I don't consider anything I do in Indianapolis to be like remote or anything super creative. I lived there for 5 years. I built the team. I know the ins and outs of the market. So there's really not anything special to it other than maybe managing people from afar. So we decided that we wanted for branding to roll out kind of a multi-market We Buy Houses SEO type play. Now, what I want to be clear here on is for most people, hopping into SEO doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. It's kind of a long-term strategy. It took us 6 months to see results in Indianapolis. It took us 9 months to see results on kind of a larger scale. That being said, a way you can use this strategy in your market is to target your satellite markets. If you're going to do some pay-per-click, if you're trying to pull in We Buy Houses, my main market is Indianapolis, but it's pretty competitive waters to jump into pay-per-click. I've got friends that are spending $20,000 a month there. So one of the things we do is we hit the satellite towns. We Buy Houses Beech Grove, We Buy Houses Lawrence, We Buy Houses Noblesville, kind of all these little suburbs, right? So yes, the search volume's lower, but so is our cost per lead. Allows us to get leads and get deals done off of pay-per-click without spending a fortune. So we kind of took what we learned from our friends that had done this and kind of just followed through the process. So my notes look like, maybe we should use a company called We Go Look to take pictures. We tried that and it was pretty terrible. So not something we really do. We thought maybe we should pay for a BPO, which is a broker's price opinion, because these are markets that we don't live in. We don't know. Any of you guys that are on here that have ever done a deal like me, you probably know in your own market that some stuff is very street by street, right? If you're on this side of this street, comps are 200. If you're on the other side, they're 400. So if you're hopping into a market you've not been in, you don't know anybody, how do you identify those kinds of trends? So that was kind of our thought, is maybe we pay for an appraisal prior to closing or something. How are we going to get this funded if it's a deal we have to close on, right? It's one thing to go to a new market and like, oh, I'm going to like build a buyer's list. It's something different to like, okay, I'm going to close on this deal because I told this person I was going to. And am I going to be able to sell one of my private lenders on like, hey, I know you do stuff in Indianapolis. How about this other place 4 hours away on a property I've never seen, on a house that I've never walked, that nobody from my team has ever seen? Like, sign me up for that, right? So a lot of question marks, a lot of kind of fill in the blanks. And what we ultimately decided was to just like, let's go for it. We kind of like bull in a china shopped our way through it and ended up getting this deal done. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys now. Any questions you have as we go through this, flick them in chat and I'll go through them kind of in the order that they came in. So lead source, like we mentioned, was SEO. So, and this is the kind of access we give you guys on these calls. This is this lead in my CRM, right? Like there's nothing hidden here, anything that like you're wondering about. So there's a couple things I want to point out with this deal because there's some really good lessons, even if like you don't ever do deals remotely. So when the lead initially came in, it was 5 months ago. It's just closing in December. I don't know about you guys. I'm not the most patient. I'm a big fan of Amazon Prime, let alone waiting 5 months for something like this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this deal and kind of what happened with it, all the hoops and hurdles we had to jump through. But the big thing on this one is we really just didn't give up. We were super persistent on it. One of the things I've learned is some of our most lucrative deals are these ones that take a lot of work that, you know, the average person may decide, it's not worth it. So when this lead initially came in, it was back in July. The wife called in and she actually got into Call Porter. They take all of my calls and have for years, even in our remote stuff. She tried to book an appointment, which didn't work. This is like 4 hours away from my office up north in a market I'd never even heard of. This a city called Osceola, Indiana. So obviously we weren't going to be able to run an appointment. So we ended up kind of saying, hey, let's just do a phone call. Now, when we initially talked with the lady, she was asking something like $80,000, $90,000, which is pretty low, right? Zestimate's $204,000. Now, if you like ever pitch somebody on comps and throw out Zestimate, it's not going to go well for you. We use that as just like a rough litmus test before we dig in a little bit deeper. And I'll show you guys how we did that and what that looked like. So one of the things, one of the concerns we had was her asking price was really, really low. So we thought either the place is totally trashed, or like maybe she's not all there because she was a little bit older. Now, this is something I want to be super clear on. If you ever have somebody that there's even a hint of maybe they're not all there, do not go under contract with that person to purchase without looping in other family members. We have these happen all the time, right? And it's, hey, is there somebody in your family we can pull into this conversation? One of your kids, maybe grandkids, somebody else, right? One of the fastest ways to end up on the 5 o'clock news is you bought Nana's house for $4. And, the kids didn't know about it, right? So we kind of walked through that, kind of who else can we talk to, and ended up getting some other people in the family involved. We ended up finding out was she was actually like perfectly lucid and pretty good health, but her husband, on the other hand, Jack, who was on title, was headed downhill pretty fast. I think it was kind of late stage Alzheimer's kind of a deal. You'll notice initially we were super conservative with kind of where we were at. We thought comps were about 190, and I'll show you where we got that and why. Based off of kind of what she described to us, we estimated it would need about a $30,000 rehab, and our plan was to buy it for about 82. Maybe we could wholesale it to somebody for 92, making about $10,000. Now, as this deal went on, we were able to get the property under contract. One of their big motivating factor was his health was headed downhill, and they owed $9,000 in back taxes. Initially $6,900 up to $9,300. That if they weren't paid by this date in November, state was going to get the house, right? So not what these folks wanted. Now, the other thing that unfortunately happened about the time we said, okay, cool, we're going to go ahead and take over we'll pay the property taxes to get it current and then close on the house. The husband who was on title passed away. So the guy we were under contract with to close on ended up passing away. So for anybody who's not familiar, what that means is the property now has to go through probate. right? So the challenge with that, it can get tied up in the court. It can take months, and we had to pay the taxes. So what we ultimately decided to do is a little risky on our end, but we kind of got like in a written agreement with the seller that we were going to pay off the taxes as basically like our earnest money effectively. If this had come up in court, I don't think we would have won, but we decided it was worth paying off her taxes to see if we could still get this deal done without her losing the house. So we cut a check, paid off the house, and we actually helped her hire an attorney to attempt to pull the property out of probate. For anybody who's tracking all of the steps here, it was pretty messy, right? This isn't your typical like, geez, I'd like to sell my house. Perfect. I'll take your offer. Awesome. Let's go close. So on this deal, we used PropStream to analyze the property and pull comps. Now, advice on PropStream. So if you can get MLS access, awesome. MLS access is the end all be all. However, PropStream is a tool that I would have totally killed to have had access to when I was just starting out. Way better than using like Zillow or Redfin or something like that for comps. Now, I will let you know one lesson we learned. PropStream's sale amount on properties, if you're using it for comps, isn't always what I would call the most accurate. A lot of the times it's like the last reported price that went through the MLS. So this could have been the last list price and maybe they sold for less. So definitely like use this as a good litmus test, but then verify your data. Our offer on the property was $70,000 total. Now, for any of you guys who are doing math at $187,000 as the average, ARV, us paying 70, I'm not upset. Ming, I flicked through my trial link in the comments for you on that. So I'll show you what comps look like out of that, and then I'll also show you kind of the additional steps we took this one through. So this is what comps looked like. So we had our property, and then the average was about 192. Now, our house was not in any means what I would call like bad condition. It was kind of like your typical like grandparents' house, if you will. Lots of kind of just small odds and ends, kind of outdated. So what we decided is, okay, first off, we're actually going to try this. So if we're going to buy a house in a market we've never seen, we should do an inspection. There's no like, sexy loophole I have here for you of like a way to get inspections done anywhere in the country. We literally just Googled Osceola, Indiana home inspectors. Dug through some reviews and found a guy. So I'll show you what our inspection report came back looking like. So this was the house. Lots of just like pretty small odds and ends. Like the oven did not operate. Like, okay, that's fine. Stuff like there are stains on the carpet and the bookshelves are sagging. Okay. Some light bulbs were out. The gist we got from going through this inspection report, if your inspector's ever putting things like the ceiling fan is missing a light cover, chances are you probably got a pretty good house. I won't scroll through this whole thing because it's 52 pages long, but kind of just quickly see kind of some of the condition of this property. There's kind of some odds and ends. Front light pole was broken. Sink was slow to drain. Furnace filter is dirty. Oh heavens. Furnace vent is dirty. Like, okay. Air conditioning was operating at the time. Garage shelf not supported properly. Some cracking in the bricks. Gutters needed cleaned out. A couple shingles were popped up. Long story short, nothing too terrible. Water damage leading to a garage. That happens all the time. That's totally fine. Stains on the exterior, trash in the back, old deck. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm looking at this deal and it's in my market, it's like a pretty solid deal. Nothing awful, as far as condition goes. So after that, we got that inspection back and we said, okay, this doesn't look too bad. The house itself looks pretty decent. So we then went and had a realtor pull comps for us. Give me a second. I'll pull that up for you guys. And one of the things we had him look for is what we call as is comps. So anytime you're looking at doing a wholesale deal, which is what this is, a wholesale deal is basically like you're going to close on a property and you plan on doing like no work, but you think you can make more buying the property, turning around and listing it, than you can doing like a traditional wholesale deal. So on this one, this was what our realtor sent us back. So an as-is comp is I'm looking for a house that's kind of in the exact same condition, in the same neighborhood. One of the things you'll find is as investors, if you're going, 75% minus repairs, minus what you're hoping to make, is we end up with some pretty low offers. And a lot of the time stuff sells for more than that as is on the MLS. So I'm under contract for $70,000. And we get this back of the worst, cheapest comp in the neighborhood was 128, with 158, 154, and 148 being other options. I don't know about you guys. At this point, we're thinking, okay, maybe we've got a winner on our hands here. So the attorney we hired was able to successfully pull the property out of probate, skipping that process. Similar to how we found our inspector, is how we found our listing agent. So we ended up having them go ahead and list the property. We did spend about $2,000 on our remodel, crazy amount of money. We had to replace something in the furnace that was like $900. And then the amount of trash that they left was substantially more than we'd kind of initially planned for. So I think our clean out was something like $1,500. All in all, we ended up right into the deal for about 72 grand. We listed for 150,000. And in something like 4 days, we had multiple offers almost immediately. In 4 days, we narrowed it down to the winner and took an offer for 158 grand. This makes this my second most lucrative single family deal that I've ever done. So a couple other challenges and things that came up on this deal. Getting it funded was a little bit interesting, but it's not that hard to sell somebody who's worked with you on funding a deal when you're asking for a 40, 50% loan to value. And we provided all of that information. Here's comps. Here's the inspection report. This is a really good house. We know it's in a weird market. Our pictures were nothing super great. I mean, I think they were self-shot by the agent or by some, cheap TaskRabbit type contact. The big thing here though, is we really just kind of tried it and fumbled through the deal. But the neat thing is, we've got 70,000 plus reasons that we now know that this works, that this model is something that can be done in other markets and that can be used. Now, if you're on this call and you're in a market that's not stupidly expensive, you're in Dallas, you're in Vegas, you're in Houston, you're in Michigan, right? There's not really the need for you to look at virtual markets. Reason being, I'm a big fan of focusing on deals in your own backyard or in what I call a satellite market, something that you can drive to. That being said, we do have a gentleman with us from New Zealand. Chances are he's not going to be able to commute to a market. RV commission we ended up paying on this deal was 3%. So nothing super nuts. The agent actually ended up being a friend of a friend. We just kind of put out into our market, hey, we think we're going to do a deal here. Does anybody know an agent here? And the guy was absolutely on it with getting stuff done. Now, I will say we did make sure we managed him, because looking at some of his listings, some of his photos and descriptions and stuff were just hot garbage, but did really, really, really well by us. So that is kind of in a nutshell the steps and everything that went into closing a $70,000 virtual wholesale deal. Tim asked earlier the number of touches that were done on this deal, and I can't even count. In our CRM alone, over 5 months, it was north of 100. So definitely a lot. Our normal deal takes us 10 touches to close. So 100 is a lot. But, you know, a lot of the times, a lot of the deals people are doing are deals that take a little bit more work. One of the guys I work with just did a deal in St. Louis and made $22,000. His title company told him they couldn't close it because there was a lien and they couldn't figure out who the creditor was. And he went out, pounded the pavement for a couple of weeks, found it, got it taken care of, and secured a $22,000 deal that I think a lot of people would have given up on. Will Schuster asks, how would you go about raising the capital for this deal if you only had a few properties under your belt? That's a good question. If I only had a few under my belt, I probably would have gone with hard money. A lot of hard money companies now are 8, 9, 10% interest with a point or two. You'd have to do 10% down. So we would have had to have came out of pocket, $7,000 to fund this thing. Couple hard money lenders that I haven't worked with, but I know a lot of people who have. Lima One Capital is one. Iron Bridge Lending out of, I think they're out of Portland, they're out of the Northeast or Northwest, is another good one. And there's a group out of the Northeast that we've done some stuff with called Dominion Group. So, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed if you'd only done a few deals and maybe not with this person yet to be like, hey, why don't you try this with me in this town that nobody's heard of? The other thing that made us, I think, a little bit more comfortable with this deal and a little bit less gun shy was it was like an A class, B plus, A minus area, right? This isn't, if I have anybody in here in Detroit, please don't take offense to this, but I would be ignorant to try to do a virtual deal in a lower income part in a market in somewhere like Detroit, where I don't know street by street how stuff works. I don't know what comps are. This was a pretty like cookie cutter, good school district type of a deal. But we never would have gotten it had we not thought, hey, is this possible? Is this something we can do? Y'all, I'm still at the level that $70,000 that's not a deal I'm upset about, right? What other questions we got? Got 61 of y'all on here. Does not have to be related to this deal. So if you've got pretty much anything you've ever wanted to ask, now's your time. Could be finding deals, funding deals, managing contractors, staff. Happy to answer any of that. Noel, I sent an email with questions. Yes, I think I saw that actually. I will dig that up. I think really liked your questions if they're the ones that I'm thinking of. Mark, how often do you follow up? Good question. So we don't want to be annoying, but we do want to be persistent. So I would say on average, initially when the lead's pretty hot, like 2 or 3 times a week, it starts to go cold. We're going to drop to weekly. We're still not getting anything. We may go to bi-weekly, then eventually monthly, and then eventually less than that. Nick asked, was this a direct mail lead or was this off of digital? No, this was digital. Not doing direct mail in markets I'm not in yet. Sheldon says, how much of our gross revenue do we spend on marketing? Our cost per deal and average profit are pretty solid. We're typically spending $2,000 or less to get a deal under contract. And my average profit on a property I don't keep as a rental right now is about $17,000. So not very much. Zach asks if I do coaching, which is funny because he's in our group. Thank you for putting this on. Thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah, Matt, man, happy to. My goal with any of this stuff that I put on or put out is really like, this is a resource that I could have really benefited from early on. When I got started, I didn't have people I could hop on and ask questions with. I kind of just like fumbled through forum posts. Noah, let me see if I can pull up your questions real quick, just because they were solid. Okay, awesome. All right, guys, these are super, super solid questions. So Noelle asks, I'm currently looking to purchase my first bird deal and I'm getting wholesale leads daily. As an investor, what should I expect from a wholesaler? So my honest answer is not much. Typically, they're going to send you an address and an asking price and pictures, and that's all you should look at. Don't trust them for comps. I wouldn't trust them for things like repair cost estimates. That's all on you and your due diligence to figure out. I'm on every wholesale list of everybody in my market. Of 143 rental units I've bought in Indianapolis, 6 have come from wholesalers. It's why we're really big fans of going direct to seller and finding our own deals. I know this is a broad question. Curious to know what you feel a good wholesaler should be providing his buyers. Yeah, so I mean, with us, we treat it the same way. Anytime I wholesale a house, I say, here's the address, here's pictures, make me an offer, right? Now with us, we do really, really try to make sure everything we shoot out is like a bird deal in our market. As one of the reasons we don't really have a problem selling our deals, because our buyers will tell us things like, hey, your deals are the only ones that I actually look at. What type of markup is typical? It really depends how experienced your wholesaler is. So if they're kind of like new, they're probably going to try to tack on $3,000 to $5,000. If they're experienced, 10 plus. If they're really good at what they do, 30, 40, 50. I know someone who just closed a $2.5 million assignment fee on a package of houses. So it's one of the reasons we are fans of going out and finding our own deals, because when a seller gives us an asking price, it doesn't really matter to us. We just kind of tell them, hey, this is where we want to be, instead of like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't work for me. As far as negotiating with wholesalers goes, you can always make an offer. You want to be kind of cautious with that, because a lot of the times, like when I send out a deal, for instance, if somebody's making me an offer, it's typically for more than I send it out at, because we price our stuff where it's a deal, right? So I'll price something at 75% minus repairs. And if somebody wants to make me an offer of 80%, I'm not going to fight them, right? Nobody in their right mind would. Your second paragraph, I'll reply back to you privately on. And then you said, lastly, what's the best approach you've seen from a buyer? I'm working my criteria and feel like once I have clear, concise criteria with numbers, wholesalers can send me those deals and know I'll close. Is this a good strategy? So not really. Any wholesaler who's doing any sort of volume, they're going to add you to a list. They're really not going to be like, oh, okay, this is what Noelle is looking for, so I'll send her this one. Meaning you're going to get all the crap you don't want to. So if anything, I would say you should get good at kind of quickly analyzing a deal and seeing, hey, is this a deal or is this not a deal? So hopefully that kind of answers some questions for you. Somebody says, do I think the future of wholesaling is 100% virtual over the phone? Absolutely not. Maybe eventually, but if you think about it, right? My parents are pretty young, mid 50s. I don't know that they've ever used DoorDash, right? They maybe just got on Facebook. So you've got to look at like who your target demographic is, and you're talking to somebody who's a retiree or a senior in their 30s or 40s, and you're trying to get them to sell like physically and monetarily one of the largest things they've ever owned. In our experience, it's significantly easier to close these in person versus doing it virtually. Now, there's definitely like pros and cons. There's people who do a lot of just over the phone. I have several friends who do, but our closing percentage and our profit margins typically are better when they're there in person. Although I can't argue with like 75 grand on a deal either. What are some of your top and most effective methods for producing deals or prospecting methods for deals, says Jack Austin. So my number one is and has always been direct mail. I don't know what it is, but it's how I started. It's what I've continued to do. And y'all remember those like function equations from back in grade school? Like you put X in, Y shoots out the other side. That's what we've built. I know if I put 2,000, 2,500 in the front end, it's going to spit out either a $17-ish thousand check or another rental property or another deal for me. So I would say that is first for us, followed up by search engine optimization, followed up by Facebook ads and Google pay-per-click, and then trailing up the rear is a little bit of cold calling. Now, somebody asked if I do RVMs and texting, and how do I handle the legalities of it? So I do not. I won't lie to you guys. I'm human. I've made mistakes. I have in the past. I actually got a stupid deal off text message marketing. I bought 2 duplexes that were worth about $150 a piece that needed like $30K in work for a combined total of $140. So walked into 6 figures in equity on a campaign that cost me a couple $100. That being said, we kind of made the decision to run a business that's not built on gray areas. RVMs in particular, I think are one of the most annoying things that's like, I mean, it's like literally spam. Nobody likes getting a voicemail, especially a phone call from an unknown number from somebody they've never talked to with a 45-second listen to my pitch. Kent Clothier's office does these all the time. If you get their phone number, I get these like, hey, it's so-and-so. Kent wants to talk to you, like pound sand, right? So no, we don't do them. And I actually have a couple friends who have been sued for them. Somebody says, missed the beginning. What are some websites or best places to find virtual deals? So if you're going out and cold prospecting, a good thing to do could be like Craigslist in like maybe potentially more a little bit like rural markets. You could do Zillow. You can try for sale by owners, but in my experience, for sale by owners don't work super well. Ryan, can I get a little deeper into how you captured the lead? So this was organic SEO on this one, just to a like carrot site, typical like post, or typical opt-in forms, like nothing like ClickFunnels-y. This was nothing like magical. This is your typical like carrot site. Fill out your info if you want to sell your house. Noel says, a friend of mine is spending $7,000 to $10,000 on lead gen. What does your monthly lead gen cost look like? So it honestly really varies. We kind of make educated decisions, look at our pipeline and decide what we have coming up and what we want to do. That being said, this month I'll be a little bit on the higher end of what I'm normally at. And I've spent like $15,000 on direct mail. Now off of that, I'm expecting about 10 deals. So if my average profit's 16, 17, I'll cut that check all day long. Bruce, shoot me a message through Slack about that. But yeah, absolutely, man. Can you run through the process of assigning deals to rehabbers, how to have leverage? So Eric, because you have the deal, you already have the leverage. So, we're really pretty firm. If they start to get into like, what would you get under contract for? What are you paying? Well, you know, how much are you going to make? We just tell them, look, either the deal works for you or it doesn't. To be frank, if you've got like buyers that make you feel like you need leverage over them, you need new buyers. You know, real estate is a very like, there's a ton of sex appeal to this industry, and you have a deal, like you have what people want. So they really should be jumping through your hoops of how can I build the relationship where you will choose to sell me this deal. All right. Anonymous asks, do lenders work with people who've never done a deal? if they didn't, none of us would ever get a private lender, right? So my first deal was funded by a stranger I met on Bigger Pockets who lived in Australia. I was doing some wholesaling and I said, hey, I want to try a flip. And I threw it out as a marketplace post and he shot me a PM and said, yeah, let's do this. And I was like, this feels a little like, the Nigerian prince thing. And we did a lot of deals together. We made a lot of money together. So absolutely. Fernando Marquez says, what is your formula for a flip? Is it the normal 70% of ARVs minus repairs equals your max allowable offer? So on a flip, I'm typically 75% minus repairs, minus what I expect holding costs to be, minus like another 10 to 15,000. So it's probably pretty close to your 70%. You also ask for buy and holds. So on buy and holds, one of the problems with the BRRRR model, if you're doing 75% minus repairs, is you're not accounting for holding costs. We noticed that in the middle of 2018, and had we not noticed that we had this particular problem, it actually would have cost me $98,000 just in interest on projects I was holding prior to refinancing with the bank. So we go 75% minus repairs, minus holding costs. And then we're also typically adding about a $3,000 to $5,000 cushion to our construction budget. I've never met a buy and hold investor that'll tell you, oh, I budgeted too much on that thing. Typically it's the other. And then you're cutting corners and you're really not ending up happy with the product you have. RV, good question. So RV asks, how would I have marketed the property if I wouldn't have gone the MLS route? Assuming you didn't have any buyers in your list in that market. Good question. Let me think about how I want to do this. I've got a video that I walk through how I find buyers that I did for the guys in my mastermind that I'd be cool with sharing with you guys, but I got to think of the best way to do that. Let me see if I've got it and I can just upload it here while we're on the call. Tell you what, I will upload it to YouTube. I'm comfortable putting that one out there. Somewhat uncomfortable, but I'll put that out there. So if you don't follow me on YouTube, check that out, but I think you do. Sam Barr says, what's your min cash flow you're comfortable with when you leave nothing in the deal? Man, I'm really trying to be at $250 a door. Obviously more is better. I've got some that I'm at like $100, right? So it really, I think, depends on the asset class of if it's a nicer property, I'm okay with thinner margins. I would not take $100 or $200 a month in cash flow on a $50,000 Midwest house, right? I'm looking for like $350, $400, something like that. But on average, that's kind of what we're shooting for. It's one reason we don't really like the 1% rule. You end up with a bunch of deals that don't really even pay for themselves. Matt, do you put your properties under their own LLC? So all of my assets are under one LLC that has ridiculous insurance policies for things I didn't even know you could get insurance for. Like if one of my employees is driving their personal car and says it's for work, whether it is or isn't, and somebody then tries to sue us because they were technically on the company's clock, we're covered. Like we have really, really weird insurance that kind of protects us from that. One thing I do want to point out on kind of like the hot market objection, I was talking to a guy in Los Angeles whose average cost per deal is $2,000 with direct mail. So maybe you don't need to find a virtual market. Maybe you just need to get a little bit better at marketing or at finding deals. Nick says, do we have digital ads outside of your market? Filtering through your channels in a different way so you can track which markets are performing. So on this kind of like SEO play we have, it's all SEO. So there's not really any paid traffic. We are paying people to help us rank, and there are costs and things that go into that. But especially if you're doing paid traffic, it's really easy to track what's working. How often, with what frequency are you sending mailers to the same property? And after how many attempts do you change your copy or just stop sending that specific address? So it really depends on the niche. If it's like absentee owners, I'll mail an absentee list and see how I feel after the fact. If we popped off a couple deals, got a really good response rate, I'll mail it again. I'm not the kind of person who hits the same list every month for 6 months. In my experience, like months 4 and 5 absolutely suck. You waste a lot of money. Now, that being said, I do highly recommend, I totally lost my train of thought. I do highly recommend following the niche, right? So if it's an eviction in your market and you're mailing eviction leads, how long does an eviction take? If it's 30 days, mail it for a month or 2. If you're in a market where that's a year, it's a different story. Same thing with like pre-foreclosures or probates or divorces. So I would say kind of follow the niche in my experience. A friend of mine actually seasons his probates. So he'll get probate data, sit on it for 6 months before he mails it at all. His goal is to catch all the people that have been ignoring everybody else, right? And then most investors have given up on those people by that point. Kind of just an interesting, kind of goofy strategy. Can you see my tattoo? Sure. It's actually kind of like an awkward thing to show. Hands are 1-4-14. Same thing in the bottom. It's my wedding date. I will tell you, if you ever get a tattoo, I realized early on that I'm not going to be picky about my tattoos. I got my tattoo done, and my older brother, who's an a-hole, goes, "How many dots are around the clock?" There's not 60. So yeah, I'm going to live with that for the rest of my life. But I think it's kind of funny. What documents are signed to get a seller under contract in a wholesale deal? So it's just a conventional purchase and sale agreement. It's nothing like extra. How long can you normally hold that contract before signing it or getting out from under it? Good question. So what we typically do is anywhere from 14 to 21 days. But it's very, very, very rare that we pull out of a deal. Normally, if we're terminating an agreement, it's like something came up on the inspection or something went wrong. Greg says, what list of motivated sellers do you suggest for new investors? So I would start with absentee owners. The vast majority of my deals have came from absentee owners. We still do that list all the time. There's just a lot of them and they tend to sell a lot. Now, I would remove properties that are owned by companies, and you can't really do this with like List Source. You may be able to do it with PropStream. I would cut out anybody who owns more than 2 or 3, the way you're targeting, or anybody who owns more than 3 or 4, where you're targeting somebody who just has 1 or 2 that they don't live in, not somebody who has a whole bunch of doors. RV says, since the property was going to go through a probate and the owner died, did you still have the contractual rights? I did not. They evaporated when he died. So we honestly kind of felt for the lady, and we decided it was worth kind of the $9,000 risk. We knew it was a risk, but the reward on the other side was definitely there. Mark Lee says, love Call Porter and Ballpoint Marketing. Thanks, man. I do too. That's how I find all my deals. Who am I sending direct mail to? So I won't give you guys too many freebies. But the best way to do this, of figuring out where you want to go, is look at what could potentially motivate somebody to want to sell and follow that logic. So things like divorces, probates, pre-foreclosures, back taxes. That's typically the direction we're going, but I also still mail to a lot of absentee owners. In fact, Ballpoint and Call Porter customers who pair the two are typically seeing a deal for about every $2,500 that they spend on marketing. National average, I think, is $5,000 or $7,500. So that's pretty stinking solid. Do I ever put my own money into the deal, or do I always look for private money? I mean, I could, but why would I? Right? So we have lenders that we're doing 8% interest only, no points, and they'll fund everything. So, I mean, occasionally I've had deals that I've had to throw some cash into. But it's very pretty rare. Occasionally I'll have a deal where, maybe a new lender's like, oh, I want you to leave, 10% in here or something. And we're like, cool, we'll do this on the first one to get them comfortable. Roy says, for your cold calling, what dialer are you using and what lists are you hitting? Good question, man. So I do not do a ton of cold calling by any means. I used to. In 2018, I made $100,000 on one seller just on cold calling. He sold me it was 12 hood houses, and we made 7 or 8 a house. It was a great deal. It was one of those times when I really needed a deal too, for anybody who's on here and wants to be honest about their marketing. But I really don't do much of it. And when we do it now, it's to very, very targeted niche lists. And I do have a little bit of a perk of being a licensed broker in Indiana, and that's that the do not call list doesn't apply in our market. So back to the legality thing there, make your own decisions and tread lightly. Noel, did I get all of your email addresses? I did. Actually, I do have all of your guys' email addresses. So because you registered for this and showed up, I will email you that video because I would rather not post it, I've decided. Do I ever network and call agents and or other wholesalers to acquire your deals? Why or why not? Yeah, we definitely try. What we find though is a lot of the time the deals are really, really pretty thin. So that's why we're a big fan of going out and finding our own deals. Nalia Craig says, I live in Oakland, California, extremely hot market in the Bay Area. Sometimes the 75% doesn't work here. What would you do in a situation like that? Yeah, so I would consult local folks in your market and find out what they're offering. My guess is it's probably 80, 82%, something like that. So you do have to play to the market. If you noticed on this deal when I initially showed it, we initially went 65% minus repairs, being super conservative on our end. We ended up actually getting it for less than that, but that's not typical. Normally we're paying about 75%. And on a vinyl village, sometimes I'll even go up more. Let's see. I can't see your whole. Marls says, what should one who's brand new start with? 40 to 50,000? Really depends on what you want to do. This is not like a wholesale webinar or anything like that, but that is how I got my start. I'm a really big fan of reverse wholesaling when you're starting out, which is find a guy like me in your market. Best way to do that, Google We Buy Houses and see who pops up first and go knock on their door. Go talk to that person. And just, hey, if I can find you deals and you flip or wholesale them, will you split profits with me 50-50? That was really how I kind of got my start. I started with no money. I actually put $2,500 on a credit card without telling my wife, which is not something I should do now, let alone back then. And didn't really have a way of paying it off. And my first month got my first deal and I made $12,000. I wouldn't necessarily do it how I did it is the disclaimer there. Consult your advisors, no results are guaranteed, legal blurb there. Eric, after you got the contract signed, if multiple buyers are interested, what's the best way to handle that? They all want to see the house. Do you make them sign the assignment contract first? No. So we'll let them walk through it, and multiple people are interested. Awesome. All of our properties are best offer. So if my best offer is lower than my asking price, perfect. You're going to get it. If my best offer is $10,000 more and you offer my asking price, I'm not going to take your deal. So I will say, just make sure you let them know that up front. And we don't always take the highest amount. It's highest and best. So if somebody's a stronger buyer and they're using cash and sent me a screenshot of their bank account versus somebody's a brand new investor trying to use hard money and they don't know if they're going to be able to get it, I'm going to go with what I feel like is a done deal, even if it's not necessarily the most money. Anthony Cable says, do you use or hire Carrot staff to help increase SEO rankings? Good question. So I actually have a guy on staff who does all my stuff. No, he's not taking on anybody else. Sorry. But I have heard great things about Adrian Dinez, who works for Carrot. I've also personally met him several times, and is somebody whose character and how he handles business, I'm comfortable sending someone to. So I would probably talk out to Adrian. And if he's watching this, hopefully he didn't just hear me butcher his name. On the Carrot side, I'm going to do another video on this. I'll probably just throw it on my YouTube though, but We did hire Carrot to do their like concierge design process, which is an extra $2,500 over like a typical Carrot site. And I would write that check over and over and over again. We had an older Carrot site that quite frankly just looked awful. And we ended up having them go through and redo it. And we were thrilled with the results. So if you're like, you want something different than a typical Carrot site, but don't want to have to like customize everything yourself, that's a good option. Feel free to tell them that I sent you. Matt Morris says, where is the absentee owner list generated from for your local area? So you can really get that from just about anywhere. Listsource.com is a place you can pull that. It's also something that you can pull through PropStream, actually at a cheaper cost. Some title companies can pull it for you. I use ListSource for a long time though. Have you ever tried using virtual assistants to cold call and set appointments? Yeah, Jack, I have. Didn't have the best luck with it. And even friends of mine that ran full-blown cold calling teams ended up letting go of their virtual staff and hiring Americans, and their results and their return on investment was better. You think about it, you get a cold call out of the blue and somebody sounds like they're in the Philippines. You know, a typical, look at your market, right? Like I have friends in markets like Florida where it's really okay. People in the Midwest are awful. So if they sense like any sort of an accent, they're very much, you're like, get out of here. So doesn't work super well with that. If a deal is too thin, I've seen some investors do some sub 2 stuff. I've done one myself. What are your thoughts? Good question. So this is kind of like seller financing, and that's where does the money come from for the repairs? A lot of investors, myself included, early on, were like, I'm going to buy deals with like no money down. Now I do that with the Burr model literally all the time. That's my entire portfolio, right? But the whole like, I'm going to approach a seller, get them to sell it to me on payments can absolutely clobber you. I had a property I bought that, we did with private money where upon evicting the tenant, the guy caused $64,000 worth of damage on his way out. And the insurance company let the house sit for 9 months. All the meanwhile, I was paying utilities, I was paying insurance, I was paying taxes, I was paying private lender payments. Had I got that deal early on in my career, that would have killed me. Doesn't seem like a lot of money to me now, but bleeding $1,000, $1,500 a month when you're brand new, that would have put me under. If you remember earlier, I started with no money. So I will say the exception, what I've done with that, occasionally we've had a deal where it's like, okay, this is a deal, but it's too thin for me to justify just outright purchasing the property. In which case we've said, hey, I'm going to do like a lease option. So I will rent the house from you for this, and I have the option to purchase it from you for this. And then we've spent like maybe $20,000 on a remodel of our own cash and then profited above and beyond that. I've done, I think, 2 or 3 of those now. Not like a big part of our business model, but is something that we do. Jack, how do I prospect for buyers? So because you're on this call and registered for it, I'm going to download all of your guys' emails and send you a like private link to a video on that. So I will get that out to you guys. I would say tonight, but I'm going to go to dinner after this. So probably tomorrow. But there's like 4 different ways I do it. So I'll flick that over to you guys. Was this helpful for you guys? Is this something that you'd like to kind of see more of these? Okay, awesome. Chris Lucero, dude, I'm still here for you. I know your background, your story. So super happy to see you on here. I'm using REI Black Book. Would you have a program I could leverage to create what I'm doing? Love the letters, moving slow, but still hoping to meet you someday. I've got to be careful what I say because this is recorded, and I know the owner of REI Black Book, but I'm not a huge fan of their websites and CRM and stuff. I just think there's better options out there. So if you're on this, I'm going to ask you to keep that confidential. So don't go run out to them and be like, Ryan said your guys' stuff sucks. So help me out a little bit there. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. Let's see. Just the start of my career. Very grateful for your support. Yeah, man, absolutely. First time, Eric. Awesome. I'll warn you, not all free webinars are like this. Yeah, you can potentially get emails from the MLS as well. We actually talk about that in the video. I'll flick you guys. Chris, still here in confidential. Cool. All right. Anything else before we wrap up and call it a night? I was planning on giving you guys about an hour. You got about 5 minutes left. Hugo says, do you have a tax preparer you recommend in Indianapolis, and how do you check on liens for a property? So I actually am in the process of firing my CPA. So no. As far as liens go, I use a Monument Title Company or title agency for all of my closings there. Dan Bostic is the owner. Great guy. Feel free to tell him that I sent you. They do all of our title work, so they make sure all that stuff is good. Mike, what's for dinner? Good question. There's a place by us called Common Stock that we really like. That's like, they have like 4 things on their menu and it's literally perfect every time. We also go there so often though that the owners know me. So it's kind of like, I feel weird. Like, it's like when you go through like a drive-through and they call you on it. RV, am I wearing my new loafers for dinner? I'm not. They're not here yet. They're coming from Italy because David's bougie and gave me a good recommendation. Somebody says, how did I learn to get good at writing and copy? Scott, man, I didn't really take any like classes or courses. I never went through like, in fact, I don't know if you guys noticed this. I posted that I was doing this on my Facebook and my wife sends me a screenshot and she's like, yo, you spelled space wrong. Like SPACE. It's a pretty easy one to do. For me, it's more just like any of the content you see me put out is typically like a revelation I have or a lesson that I've learned. And, I also try to look at what were some of the issues and hurdles I had to overcome to get to where I'm at, and how can I potentially help somebody overcome that? And some of the times those things that I share are a little like deep, they're a little personal. I've got an email that a lot of you guys have seen, a lot of you maybe haven't, that talks about kind of where I was at in 2016, which was kind of my low point. And I was like 400 grand in the hole and like had weeks I didn't know how I was going to feed my family. So some of it's sharing stuff like that because I know that there's other people that are in that spot. And then some of it's like, fun stuff. Whole reason I got into real estate, I'm a car guy. So I went and I was looking at Ferraris the other day. So share that kind of stuff too. Ethan says, it's a good question, a long question, but I'd like to generate leads through online advertising. What systems would you recommend? How much would you invest monthly in advertising? Who would you target? So there's a lot to unpack there. As far as like systems and stuff go, I use ClickFunnels for all of my opt-ins. Actually got their like 2 Comma Club award the other day, which was pretty cool. If you're into online marketing, you know what that is. As far as what you should spend, it's really going to be about what you can generate. So the way I look at online marketing is how much can I spend and how can I spend more profitably? So if I'm able to figure out a way to profitably do something at $5,000 a month, how can I do $5,000 a week? Right? How can I do that a day? I've actually, a mentor of mine who I hired to help me learn some of the online advertising stuff is trying to get to the point that he does over 100K a day. Right? So definitely levels to it. Noel suggests the Adweek Copywriting Handbook by Joseph Sugarman. There you go. Check that out. One thing I've learned, if you've ever got somebody that's in a spot you want to be in and they recommend a book, read it. So somebody's throwing that out, I'd check it out. The Harmon brothers, I think, have some books out as well. I love their ads. They're hilarious. So I would check out some of their stuff. If you're going to go down the road of kind of online advertising, I would just make sure you understand the policies to a T, and they change all the time. So make that part of like your daily reading. How has the move to San Diego gone? On a personal level, great. Well, our actual move was freaking brutal. It did not go well at all. My Alfa Romeo blew a tire. I ate a pothole actually because I was seeing if a cop pulled out behind me because I was driving faster than I should have been. And that stranded that car in St. Louis for 3 days. Noah, fortunately, stayed behind for me. Noah's my business partner in my local real estate company and also like my best friend at this point. He drove it to St. Louis where we'd kind of stopped and then we drove the rest of the way. We also moved into a house that we then had to move out of and find a new house because they couldn't get occupancy because the property had a permit issue. So I moved twice in the span of like 3 weeks when I got here. So our initial like landing here was like brutal, but we love it now. Matt is my wife stationed in San Diego. Yeah. She's a Navy psychologist. So she's at Balboa. Will there be a replay of this? So I think I set it to record. I normally do like full on Zoom calls, but with like everybody's videos and stuff up. But what I've learned with groups this size is that doesn't always go well. So we went more with the webinar format. So yeah, as long as it was recorded, we'll get that over for you. Matt, I was hoping that was the reason you moved to that expensive state. Man, after I'm here, even if she wasn't, I think I'd still want to be here. We've even talked about if she ends up not re-enlisting or even if we get sent somewhere else, we'll probably come back. We love it here. We just love kind of the lifestyle and the people. Jack, what's the minimum amount of equity a deal needs to have for it to be worth you pursuing? For me, I'm going 75% minus repairs, minus what I hope to make. So depends on the size of the deal. That could be like 10 grand on a small little rough deal, or that could be 50,000 on something thicker. Tim says, have some Croc drivers from Italy, a must have. Yeah, I had a pair I loved, but they blew out in like a week. Bruce, what kind of Ferrari am I looking at? I want a 458 Italia, last naturally aspirated V10 that Ferrari will probably ever make. So not only do they sound incredible, but I probably won't lose my rear on it in depreciation either. Cool, guys. Well, I'm going to call this a wrap. I will get that video emailed out to those of you that registered for this. People who didn't show up on this call are going to be like, what is that? But we'll get that over to you guys. If there's ever anything you need or anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. See y'all.